The second last race of this season is upon us here in our F1 Manager 22 career mode here with Audi in Season 2. And we are making a massive decision because we are 1 point behind Scuderia Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. 2 races to go and we've been flip-flopping about with Ferrari, getting to second, then down to third, getting to second, driver makes a mistake, locks up, crashes into the wall, and I want to change something because I don't know if we're going to be continuing this series furthermore into Season 3. We're going to have to see about that, but for the end of this season, I know something needs to change so that we can maximize our points. So we are taking a huge decision. It's a little bit rash as well, to be honest, based off last episode, but we are swapping out Fernando Alonso. Yeah, the star older driver that we signed in the middle of this season and replaced Bottas with. We're doing the same thing to him that we did to Bottas, and we're booting him out and we're getting in Lando Norris. I'm making this decision also based off, real life, little rumors and, little comments by pundits that, potentially could Lando be moving to the Audi team in 2026. Andrew Seidel is now the CEO over there. Could he be used as a way to kind of pinch Lando away from McLaren at the end of his McLaren contract to the Audi work setup? But in the game, we're going to make that a reality because we've signed him as our brand new driver. He's 87 rated in the game. So in terms of on paper, pure stats, he's better than Fernando Alonso. He's better than Pierre Gasly even. So he could become a new team leader for us. And I'm hoping, compared to Fernando Alonso, who has been locking up quite a few times, we had, 2 big crashes from him in the last couple of episodes. I'm hoping that this could iron those out in a crucial last 2 races versus Ferrari. It has cost us a fair bit of money as well, but we've also got the money to actually use. We've got plenty in the bank to make this new hire, and like I said, with the return of this series, wanting to finish out this season like we've done with the car, where we've been overspending and just making new parts willy-nilly like every single race in between episodes, in between races, to try and keep up with development and keep up with pace with Ferrari. We're spending this money just to get Lando in for 2 races at Brazil and Abu Dhabi to try and secure this P2 in the Constructors' Championship. And of course, to be fair, if you go back and watch the episode where we signed Fernando Alonso first to this team to replace Bottas, we always said Alonso is never a long-term signing because he is one of the older drivers. We know he's going to start dropping off in terms of stats as well eventually. I know that happens pretty slowly in this game, but he was never meant to be a long-term signing. He was a short-term solution to get this team to where we wanted it to, but now I feel like we no longer need his services, and I want someone else to come in the last bit of this season and try and have a sucker punch on Ferrari, hopefully. So now we're going into the Brazilian GP with a brand new driver lineup. We've also got Leclerc with a penalty in this race, so that could also help us out in the race. But in Q3, Lando Norris has qualified P4 for his first outing, Gasly P6, with Leclerc and Perez having penalties. That's going to elevate us up to a pretty decent grid position for the race. And this race could be pretty exciting as well because we've got rain involved, which is always an opportunity to try and get one over the AI. Now, because we know the inter period is coming, I'm going for an aggressive 2-stop with 2 sets of medium tyres, knowing that we are going to have to pit for inters, and there's no point trying to eke out any hards, for example, or use the softs because they're not going to go long enough to then go on to inters. So 2 sets of mediums are the order of the day until the intermediate period, and hopefully we can just score pretty big with both our drivers to set us up for a decent finale into the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in our fight with the Scuderia. So without further ado, let's get into this then as we go to 5 red lights. The second last race, the Brazilian GP. Lando Norris debuting for Audi here on the front row alongside Verstappen into turn 1. Sainz tries to go around the outside. Leclerc down in P8 with that penalty. Not a massive penalty, but it will help us out a little bit, hopefully. But But right now, Lando up in P2, tucked up behind Max Verstappen. Gasly in P4 and looking to maybe try and get Sainz in the later laps. But straight away in the middle of Sector 2, Lando Norris has got up into P1 and leads the race for our team. And now we push away to try and break that 1 second gap of DRS. But Verstappen's a tough cookie to try and consistently do that. So he sticks with us, to be honest, even as much as we pushed in the opening 2 laps. So he's still very much there within 1 second, unfortunately. But at least Gasly, who's got ahead of Sainz, and Gasly is tucked up behind Verstappen. So soon we might be able to try and get a 1-2 going and then control the race from there, I hope. Gasly on the inside, punches down, a lot of curb taken, gets up into P2. But Verstappen is going to, like I said, he's the quickest driver on this game by a mile, so he's going to be very tough to hold up. We're trying our best with Gasly to do so, but you can see there in the top left, Verstappen was momentarily ahead of us, and he's nipping at the heels. Sainz is there as well. We've been doing quite well with Gasly to hold them up, though, because there's now a 2 second gap ahead to Lando Norris in the lead. So it's right now it's working well, but it's early days. It's only lap 4 of a whole 71 lap race here around Sao Paulo, so we've got plenty of work to do. And unfortunately, eventually the outright pace of the Red Bull and Verstappen's going to come through, and Verstappen dives down the inside. We're side by side through the first 2 turns. Gasly, I'm trying to fight back with him, use a bit of the ERS when we can, but also trying to harvest it in the right corners. It's a very tricky business trying to balance that as much as you can. Verstappen down the inside as they go into Sector 2 and down the crest. Verstappen, he's into second and he keeps on going. Lap 8, Verstappen showing the true pace of the Red Bull and himself as he goes and chases after and overtakes Lando, as now Lando and Gasly are going to be side by side. Gasly getting up into P2. I don't really mind which driver's ahead. I just want them to stay ahead of that Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, but he's lurking about a bit too much, and this is a bit worrying now as Lando's losing pace from maybe having pushed a bit too hard in the opening laps, and Sainz gets up into P3, but Leclerc's still down in P7, which is good news for us in terms of the outright points. That's all I really care about today, is the outright points. But Sainz then overtakes Gasly and we're down to 3-4, but it was always coming, because I don't want to over push these tyres too much, because even though we are going aggressive with 2 sets of mediums, they still do need to go a fair distance to make the, you know, the 2 stints work before intermediate. So we've had to relax on that. But now the safety car might be out. There's multiple crashes and we've called Gasly and Norris in under this safety car, because there's been a kerfuffle behind with the Haas and the Williams in Sector 2. So that might just change things. So we're 3 and 4 under the safety car, though. We pit both for hard tyres because there's still way too long to go onto Inters. So ironically, I actually am using the hard tyres after having, you know, scoffed at the thought of using them. But the only reason is because we got a free pit stop, and now once they make their pit stop, the rest of the grid, I say, they're going to fall behind us, because there's no way they can take mediums all the way to intermediate. So they're going to have to do it. And this is a massive moment for us. Verstappen locks up. Verstappen locks up from the lead. So he's way down the order now. But all of a sudden, Ferrari are 1-2. Might seem a bit worrying. Leclerc's recovered quite well. But they're 1-2, but they need to make a pit stop before intermediates come onto the car, because they can't take it all the way. So it's a case of just trusting the process that eventually that free pit stop that we took under that safety car is going to pan out for us. Right now, doesn't look great, but they will have to pit and will be there to take track position. And now Max is off. There's a second safety car maybe, and it's because Verstappen has had another issue. He already locked up once and lost the lead and gave Ferrari the 1-2. And then on his own, all by himself, he locks up again, steams off to turn 1, and faces the same fate Fernando Alonso did twice last episode, and he crashes out the Grand Prix. Verstappen's out. That's big, because now we're going to take a 1-2 lead, because everyone comes in finally for their first ever pit stop in this race. We've already done ours. in the first safety car. So we just very easily take 1 and 2. Gasly leads from Lando Norris, and Verstappen's out, which means we have a much better chance of winning this race maybe without Verstappen, because he's always such a tough cookie to try and crack. So now we're getting going again. Lap 23. Gasly! Oh! Gasly spun! No! Gasly spun! We were on full-out attack with him and Norris to try and get away from everyone with the 1-2, and it's come back to bite us. Gasly with a simple lock-up and spin there. Ironically, I was about to tell him, don't fight Lando, let him by, and let's try and just work with some DRS together. But no, Gasly's, he's spun it. He's now down to P18. He's not out of the race. But ironically, in an episode where I signed Lando to replace Alonso because he was doing that too much, Gasly just goes, okay, I'll start doing it now. So that's a little bit frustrating, but he's still in the race, and there's still opportunity here to maybe make up positions later on with the rain. But it doesn't help that Gasly got held up then in this multiple car incident in Sector 2, which brings out, well, I think maybe a virtual, maybe not a full third safety car, but very, very peculiar incident. There's a big pile-up and a collision between Aston Martin and Williams car. It's just a virtual safety car, but under that virtual safety car, I actually picked Gasly for soft, because I thought he's down in P16. He's really not actually got much to lose by pitting again, going onto the softest compound. We know the rain is now going to be on the way in maybe, you know, I don't know, 10 or so laps, so the softs, we can just go flat-out attack with him. At this stage, Lando Norris has got a commanding 6.7 lead to Perez and Sainz, who are second and third. Leclerc's fallen down the order a little bit because he's behind both Mercedes cars. And now the rain arrives. Not quite 10 laps, 7 laps later from when we pit Gasly under that virtual safety car. So that gamble with Gasly didn't properly work out, but he was down in P16. He's now still P16, so we've not really lost that much. Maybe a little bit of track, you know, time to the cars ahead, but I think now we're going to gain a bit being on Inters as the earliest car, because Gasly was on the other side of the circuit, so we pit him immediately, and he's going to gain a bit of time here. You can see compared to Guan Yu Zhou and the Aston Martin there, he's actually gaining so much, because on this one lap alone, everyone's trundling around on the soft tyres, and Perez and Leclerc, for some reason, they continue to go on for one more lap further to the lap I pit Lando on. So we're in third place with Norris on the Inters. Perez and Russell, they're going to lose further time now, staying out of one more lap. I don't know why they've done it. Lap 38, Gasly now up into P13. So all of a sudden, he's gone from, you know, way out of it, P18, now is in P13 and can hopefully climb up even further. But now the virtual safety car comes out for another incident, not involving us, but that's going to help out Perez and Russell just a little bit. And save their bacon because they were still out on dries on a wet circuit. They were losing so much time, but a big 3-car collision brings out the virtual safety car. So they're going to pit underneath that and gain a little bit from it. I will say it was a bit frustrating in the virtual safety car period. I think we basically lost time to Sainz. Like, we were 6 seconds ahead of him, and we were still about 6 or 5 seconds ahead of him when we both made our pit stops. And now, all of a sudden, under virtual safety car, he's 1.5 behind me. So I don't actually recall or even remember where on earth he found this time, because he was behind. He was like where Leclerc was. He was kind of where Perez was, and now he's only 1 second behind us all of a sudden, lap 40, but it is what it is. But Gasly making moves. He's ahead of Leclerc, and he's now trying to break into the top 10, overtake the 2 McLarens. He's already ahead of Fernando Alonso, who, by the way, just went the other direction in the driver transfer market. He's now back at McLaren, ironically, alongside Ricciardo. But Gasly making great positions up to P7. So just like that, you know, we've gone from that despair of Gasly down in P18, having spun out the race, and now lap 40, 30 laps to go, he's in the points, fastest man on track, P7, and he's looking now to get up to P6 or 5 as well, as he goes down the inside of Valtteri Bottas, and now hopefully then we'll look at Lewis Hamilton as well, as we're trying to use the ERS deployment at the right times to pounce down the inside of Lewis. Not quite, but can we get him as we continue the deployment into Sector 2? Yes, we can. Up into a top 5 position for Pierre Gasly, recovering well in this race. Meanwhile, Lando, he's still in the lead, but very narrowly now. You can see the gap went from 1 second to a couple of thousandths, because Sainz now is going for it round the outside with flat-out attack with Lando at this stage because, one, and that's the only way we're sticking with Carlos Sainz in terms of pure pace, and also, like we've done many times in these wet conditions, we're going for the 2-stint strategy, so just going for that extra set of inters. I'm sure Sainz, Perez, all of these guys, they're going to take this set of inters they're on all that's in the race. I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think we can go quicker by going on a new set of inters. So it's just about pushing this set and then pushing the next set and gaining back that time. But right now we remain ahead of Sainz. We're giving him a real good battle. We're slowing him up as much as we can. But now maybe is the time for him to overtake us. We've not got too much fuel to play around with, so we're down to P2. It's the Lando battle. Ferrari versus Audi for the race lead on the grand stage here with the constructors' position in the balance. At the moment, Leclerc has actually caught up in overtaking Gasly. So at the moment, both Ferraris are ahead of our respective Audi drivers. So Norris, we need to try and get him ahead of Sainz, and we need to try and get Gasly ahead of Leclerc, but that's going to be easier said than done. Norris, though, coming back at Sainz, because we do have a bit of ERS in the tank to try and re-overtake him, and so this battle just keeps on going and going in these wet conditions between Norris and Sainz. Eventually, though, we will pit in. Sainz won't. It's just about when we decide to do that, so that we have enough laps left in the race to catch them up, and also not wanting to go too long in this stint and lose pace on these inters effectively when we could be going on fresh inters on that second stint. Meanwhile, Gasly, you can see 1.1 behind Leclerc. He's finding it tough to keep up with him. And I don't want to over-push him because we've already pushed him quite a fair bit to even get into these points-paying positions. As we now watch Sainz once again overtaking Lando, and he's going to try and go for the re-overtake on the inside again in Sector 2. Pretty much deja vu, as these guys have a very similar copycat battle lap after lap pretty much, of just always getting overtaken, getting him back down the inside. Lap 59, though, was the breaking point of it was very, very close to actually getting him back here. We have to do it later in Sector 2. And now with the tyres at 44%, I reckon now it's time to come in for that second set of inters. All the while, Sergio Perez in third, he's been gaining time. He wasn't 4 seconds behind us before. He's now creeping up and closing up to Sainz. So now this is my cue to come in onto the second set of inters. And, well, hopefully we've done enough damage to Sainz's tyres that he starts falling away on pace, trying to preserve those inters. Perez maybe catches up to him, fights him a little bit, and that's how we're going to hopefully maybe catch back up to him with Lando Norris. With Gasly, we've already made that pit stop onto a second set of inters, so he's down to P9, and he's doing the same thing, trying to fight back to where he was in, ironically, P5, where Lando is at the moment. Lap 64, Lando's got past Leclerc now, he's up into P4, and he's on the back of George Russell, looking to get in some clean air to then chase after Perez and Sainz. And look at the gap there on the top left as he slings it down the inside of Russell, gets that clean air. Perez is only 2.7 behind Sainz, so Sainz is struggling on those inters. So I don't know about Perez, but we could hopefully catch Sainz as we now move on to the second last lap of this Grand Prix. Gasly's got back up to P6. He set the fast lap of the Grand Prix, but he's unfortunately 13 seconds behind Leclerc. So I don't think Gasly's getting Leclerc. So Leclerc will outscore Gasly, but to be fair, Gasly was P18 at one point in this race. So I think it's a pretty solid damage limitation recovery drive from Pierre Gasly to even get P6. But that means we need to try and outscore Sainz with Lando. Otherwise, Ferrari have a double whammy outscoring us with both their drivers. And Perez overtaking Sainz for the lead of this race onto the last lap may just help us because, you know, yeah, it would be nice to get the race win. We were in the lead of the race earlier fighting Sainz, but we're not in a fight with Perez. We're not in a fight with Red Bull, but he's fighting Sainz so much here and they're slowing each other up that we may just do this. Last lap Lando activated. We're on full deployment mode, full out attack, much fresher intermediate. Can we get Carlos Sainz? Can we get Sergio Perez and get a last gasp win? We're unable to dive down the inside there through the right-hander, but down the left-hander we get Carlos Sainz. We're up into P2 now. well on the last sector. And now it's a run to the line. We've dumped all our battery. Unfortunately, we used too much ERS before to get Sainz. We're right up the gearbox. We're gaining on Perez, but we just can't do it. We're going to lose out on the race win by a tenth and by 1.7 tenths. But we do get Carlos Sainz on the last lap. Gasly will finish in P6. To be honest, fantastic recovery from him after that lock-up and spin to go from P18 to P6. But on the last lap, Lando gets P2 and gets ahead of Carlos Sainz. Isn't quite the race win, but you know what? He outscored Sainz, and that's what he had to do. Because ultimately, it would have been nice to get a race win with him on his first race debut for Audi, but it would have been a vanity sort of accolade because we don't really care about Red Bull. We care about Ferrari. And because he got Sainz, but Leclerc was ahead of Gasly, look at this. I can't believe it. We have ended up level on points with Ferrari going into the final race. So this episode is set up an absolute banger finale to decide P2 in this championship. After the whole season, we are level on points with Ferrari, and none of what's happened before matters because we have just got one race to go, and it's all going to come down to this one race, which team can outscore the other, because we start on the same amount of points. So crazy stuff, but you know what, I'm glad we got Lando in, because I don't think we would have been able to do this like that on that last lap. It wasn't for him. Gasly, obviously, with his own bad luck spinning, what could have been for him, because I think he could have been right up there, actually, with that aggressive intermediate strategy, not having to make up the time, of course, in the first stint. But what an ending to the first race for Lando Norris here in Audi, and roll on the final episode, guys. Then, if you have enjoyed this one, though, hit the like button, let me know what you thought in the comments below. Till next time, the championship decider for P2 between Audi and Ferrari. Level on points, let's go. Till then, goodbye.